All right, yes, it's your boy Jay Barber, Studio Noize, the voice of Black Art, again coming at you live from the Black Art American Gallery, 1802 Connolly Drive. We got an extra special guest today. I love Dawn's paintings. This is Dawn Williams Boyd. If y'all don't know who it is, say hello, Dawn.
Hello, everybody. How are you?
Yeah, she says she get loud when she get excited. So we're going to see how loud we're going to get today. We can talk to her. Dawn is a tremendous, terrific artist. She does the cloth paintings that she calls them.
Yes, that's correct.
Paintings made completely out of fabric, sewn together, quilting. She's master at what she does. I've seen it in person. I had a show at Southwest Art Center. You were either right before me or right after me. You were before me.
I was right before you.
You were right before me.
Right.
And so when I came to see the space, the one time your feet was in there, I was like, oh my God, I don't know if I can match this. This is pretty good.
You did beautiful.
Thank you. But that's when I met her. That's when I saw her work. It's fantastic. It's overwhelming in scale sometimes because it's hard to believe that this is all fabric that you put together inside of yourself. But before we get into all that, we got Dawn Williams Boyd. DawnWilliamsBoyd.com is a website. Make sure you go check her out, and that's where you can find everything about her. She don't do the IGs. She don't do it. She said she said it might be other accounts out there. They ain't got nothing to do with me.
Let's do it with me.
But Dawn working fast. Dawn, tell them a little bit about yourself before we get started.
You mean like myself, like where I grew up and that kind of stuff? Okay.
Wait, how would you introduce yourself? Somebody talking about you.
So I grew up here in Atlanta, Georgia. I was, for whatever strange reason, born in Neptune, New Jersey, of all places. But I grew up here in Atlanta, Georgia.
Neptune, New Jersey.
Neptune, New Jersey, which is across the street from Asbury Park. Asbury Park had an only white hospital.
Oh.
This is 1952, keep in mind.
Yeah.
But Neptune had a black hospital. Now, why my parents were there, my mother was 9 months pregnant. I never got around to asking her. But at any rate, I grew up in the Mosley Park area of Atlanta, Georgia, back when the shallow part of the pool still had concrete bottoms with glass and rocks in the bottom of it.
Oh, wow.
Yes. It was a neighborhood pool, though. It was the only pool we had at the time. So, I went to local schools, though if I named them, nobody ever heard of them, so I won't bother. I have a Bachelor of Fine Arts from Stevens College in Columbia, Missouri. And in addition to the cloth paintings, I paint in acrylics on various surfaces. I've been making art since 1974.
Committed, dedicated,
yes,
long time. Have you been through a lot of phases in your artwork?
I've been through a lot of mediums. When I meet a new artist whose work I admire, I want to learn the medium that they're using. So I started in oils and then moved to acrylics. I have done bas-relief sculpture in, they call it polymer clay these days. I've worked in cardboard, all kinds of things. And I've been in fabric for about the last 22 years. So the work itself pretty much stays the same. I've always been realist. I've always been figurative. I've always used black bodies for my figures. And since I discovered corrugated cardboard and plywood, I've enjoyed escaping from the square and the rectangle because I find it really boring. And so one of the things I like most about working in cloth is that you get to shape it whatever you want. So I haven't been through the only phases I've been through is when I change mediums. I get very involved in whatever I'm doing. I might do that particular medium for 15 years and then suddenly change to something else. So, but it's pretty much been the same, talking about Black folk and what we do and what is done to us.
What inspired to switch to fabric?
The Metropolitan State College of Denver asked me to do a teacher's workshop on, I know this woman's name like the back of my hand. It'll come back to me in a minute. What's the sister's name who did Tar Beach?
Oh,
you know. Come on. Your brain is way younger than mine. Come on. Anyway, it'll come back to us.
Yeah, it'll come back.
They asked me
Somebody listening and screaming at this.
Yeah, screaming. It's going, they asked me to do a workshop. And this particular artist was painting on canvas at the time. Mm-hmm. But instead of stretching her canvas on stretcher bars, she would roll it, or she framed it in patched fabric, rolled it up, and put it in a tube to get it from point A to point B. I was working in corrugated cardboard and plywood at the time, and acrylics, and having a hard time moving things from one place to another. I was living in Colorado at the time, and doing a lot of out-of-state shows, and having to package my work was expensive, time-consuming, and required skills that I didn't have.
Oh, yeah. We know that struggle.
So when I found out that this artist just rolled her work up, I'm like, oh, man, what a great idea. And then
that's awesome, yeah.
I had learned to sew as a small child, so I said, well, I can combine my drawing skills and my sewing skills and make the whole thing out of fabric and solve all my problems. Because now I can just fold it, put it in a box, take it to the post office, and mail it.
Yeah.
So that's how I got into cloth.
Oh, I love that. That's the kind of practical artist story that I love to hear.
Exactly.
Yeah. Sometimes it's like divine inspiration. Sometimes you just need to ship stuff.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I love that, Joe. So you just had a recent solo show that I saw on your website, The Tip of the Iceberg. Mm-hmm. That's at the gallery. I can't pronounce the gallery name. What is it?
It's Fort Gansevoort.
Fort Gansevoort.
Gansevoort. It's Dutch, I believe.
Okay. And that's in New York.
It's in New York City.
And so you had tremendous work out there. The thing that I love about your work is how full it is. It's full of context. It's full of imagery. Mm-hmm. It's full of colors. It's full of symbols.
I have a lot to say.
You have a lot to say. And you are not afraid to say some very pointed things about what you observe in the going-ons of America.
Somebody needs to.
Yeah.
We were just talking about doing the opposite of what everyone else does. Mm-hmm. And and I admire each and every one, but there are a lot of artists who are very busy talking about their inner personalities, their fight to be themselves in the world. Mm-hmm. There are a lot of artists who make beautiful images of our people to show our quality, to show our beauty, both external and internal, and to remember what a gorgeous people we are and all the positive aspects. And that's wonderful. But I feel it's really necessary, particularly for artists who are working in 2023, to have something to say about what's going on in the world that involves us as humans, and more so as Black people because of who we are. There's a lot happening that I feel future generations might try to erase because history is being rewritten every moment of the day. And I think it's important, pictures, that old adage, a picture's worth 1,000 words. Well, I believe it is. And so it's really necessary, in my opinion, to have something to say about what's going on in the world. So that's what I try to do.
Absolutely. And you have all kinds of stuff to say. In this show in particular, you talk about Trump, you talk about Roe v. Wade, you talk about the massacre, Wall Street massacre. You talk about like so much stuff like inside of this. And so are you kind of like a news watcher? I feel like I'm talking to, I feel like I'm talking to like my dad. My dad sat around and watch the TV shows all day, but it's mostly either he watching Gunsmoke or he watching the news. Like that's, I feel
Your father and I are probably about the same age.
Yeah, because I feel like it's something about that where, and I do the same thing, but I keep up with stuff online. So either I'm watching like YouTube clips of like different interviews or stuff going on, like the George Santos stuff just hit today. And it's important that we know it, and it's important that our artists have some kind of response to like the actual happenings
I think
of what's going on.
Yeah. I am a radio person, news radio, the local channel, the local NPR channels in particular. And so I just have them on when I'm working. And when interesting comments come up, I have to take a minute, write it down real fast so that I don't forget what they said. I spend a lot of time reading and doing research for my work. I'm reading Dr. Cress Welsing's ISIS papers right now. I just finished the 1619 project.
Yeah.
And that kind of thing influences what I'm thinking about. I'm trying to educate myself. Unlike a lot of Black folks my age, I didn't have the African American history or the African history courses in school. It had just been invented when I was in college,
right,
if you will.
Yeah.
And so a lot of what I know about us historically, I have had to learn by listening to other Black people talk and by then, making notes and then going to the library at the time or online at this time and finding out, okay, so this is what I heard, what actually happened. And so it's just interesting to me. My mother was a historian. And so all kinds of things historic interest me. I saw Till last night for the first time. And and it was interesting because it had little tiny things influenced me. This particular movie had a shot of a live cotton field in it, which I have seen before since I grew up here in Atlanta, but have never experienced. And I'm going to be I needed that image because I'm going to put it in a piece that I'm working on. And so I was imagining it, but now I know exactly what it looks like. So, just little interesting things.
Yeah. So you kind of go through this and you're like collecting information almost.
Yeah. I keep notes. I used to keep them in a little black book. And
like a literal little black book?
A little black book that fit into my backpack.
Yeah.
And if I were sitting in a car at a stop sign or in the grocery store and saw something go by me or overheard someone else's conversation, I would write it down in that book. And then once a year, I go through that book and decide, okay, this year I want to talk about this, XYZ. And so I pull all of the ideas that were written in that book that fit into that format and say, okay, I'm going to do 10 pieces this year. And so I've got notes. The notes say what inspired, what research I need to do, when and where I saw it, what I was thinking about, how big does it need to be, what colors am I going to use, and all of that stuff. Unfortunately, I lost my little black book.
Oh, no.
I know it was devastating. So I had to learn how to do that online. So now
can't lose it no more.
I send myself an email. That's what I do now. But yeah, I like to put things in a place where I'll remember where it is so that I can go back to it a year or 2 years later and refresh my memory and say, okay, I'm still mad about this. Yeah. So let's go ahead and do a piece about it.
That's a very thought out process.
Takes a long time.
Yeah. It's very organized, but I can see like how you need a certain amount of information to be able to make the work that you're making, because all the little pieces like mean something inside of it. I'm going to jump into some pieces. And Fear for My Life was one that really stood out to me. I loved it. The setup and the colors with the badges inside of it. If you got to look on Dawn's website, you can find pictures of this. It's in the Tip of the Iceberg series that you had. And there's a little boy laying down with his head like in a pool of blood. And you have badges from police sewn into it. Like I'm assuming they're actual badges that you found somewhere. Tell us about that.
The piece was inspired by the statement that the police who are causing the current spate of racial atrocities, who are killing Black people in the street for ridiculous reasons, they say, I was in fear for my life. And of course, I can't understand that because, they're the ones with the guns and the tasers and the cars and the
authority
and the lawyers and the blah, blah, blah. So what are you afraid of? We should be afraid. But so that inspired the piece. The badges I found, interestingly, at Scott's Antique Market.
Really?
Yeah. There's all kinds of really great stuff there. I don't want to advertise for them, but as an artist, my husband and I are DIYers. We are junkers. We spend a lot of time going through other people's junk. And so I found several pieces over the years that have helped me. Anyway, I was walking through there one day, and this man had a table with badges. He had Boy Scout badges, he had Air Force badges, and he had 6 police badges. And so I grabbed those up, and then I went online, and you can buy them just on Amazon. And then recently...
I'm surprised at that.
Yeah. I don't know why you can buy them on Amazon, but you can.
Yeah.
So I bought several more, and it was just what I wanted to say is that the murder of this innocent child is not happening in one place. It's happening all over, at least this country, and it's something that concerns us as Black people, and it should concern everyone, because what happens to us eventually happens to all melanin people.
Right.
But don't get me started with Dr. Cresswellson, because we'll be here all day. But yes, that's the other thing that I really like about that particular piece is there are some things that I used to do when I first started working in cloth that I don't do anymore. And so the background on this one is patched in large green on green patches. And that's one of the things that I don't do any longer that I'm trying to get back into. So.
Nice. Yeah. And I wouldn't even imagine, because I don't know a lot about sewing and how like things are put together. But I imagine so many techniques that you do are not necessarily all the time. Does that make sense? Like, is it, when you do it, is it more like the same way people think about collage and how you put it together?
It is. It is in fact a collage. The reason that I don't refer to my work as quilts is 2 reasons. One is that the word quilt, which simply means that you have pierced multiple layers. So if you staple several papers together, you quilted it. Okay. So, and then of course, everybody's mother, grandmother, great-grandmother made quilts. And those quilts were for specific things. They mostly meant to keep you warm. They mostly were meant to lie on a bed. And my work is not meant to lie on a bed. It's meant to be hung on a wall.
Yeah.
And I approach it from a painterly perspective. So I call it cloth paintings.
Yeah.
But yes, there are techniques that I learned when I do make quilts. So I have lots and lots of acquaintances who are quilters. And so I've learned quite a bit by looking at their work and trying to use the techniques that they employ in my own work. But it is it's a collage that instead of gluing it down, you're sewing it down. Mm-hmm. So one thing I like to say about my work is that it requires you to draw the same image like 8 times using pencil, marker, needle and thread, embroidery floss. And so you just draw it over and over and over again until you get it where you want it to be.
Mm-hmm. How long does it take you to work out like some of these like really complicated compositions?
It normally takes about 8 weeks. For the Tip of the Iceberg group, I was given a deadline by the gallery. And so I had to compress my system to about 5 weeks, which was something that I really didn't think I would be able to do. But then, as you and I were talking about early, the pandemic arrived just in time to give me all day, every day to do nothing but artwork. I had no place to go, nothing to do. And so I was able to do that. But what I realized at the end of the process was that I had kind of dumbed it. I don't want to say that word. I had made it much more simple, much simpler than I had done in the past. In the past, my work was full of cowrie shells and beads and sequins and this and that and this and that. And so for the next group that I'm going to do, I'm going to try to get back to that because that was where all the fun for me was. And I think it was what interested people, what drew them to my work, because with the beads and sequins, at least as you walk by, it would sparkle and sort of grab your attention.
Yeah.
So I'm looking forward to get back to that.
Yeah. So it's interesting you described it as a simplification
Definitely.
of the process. And kind of, do you find that those layers are necessary? Like the cowrie shells and the kind of extra thing on top. I almost consider it like if you're doing a painting or a print and doing some level of gesture on top of it to like reactivate it. Yeah,
sort of. Like I say, I kind of like for it to, the thing that, one of the things that interests me most about the work that I do is that from across the room, it looks like a painting. Mm-hmm. But when you walk up on it, then you realize that it's something that's a little bit more than a painting.
Yeah.
The extra things are not necessary. No, like I say, the Tip of the Iceberg group has very little in the way of flourishes, if you will. And I think those pieces are really strong the way they are. I just like to. It's just fun. It's fun for me. All of it is really fun for me, but the added little, like an exclamation point on the end. It's like, this is good. Yeah, it's really good.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like, a little something for them, but a little something for me too. Put a little bit of that sparkle on it. All right. Let's jump right back into it. Let's talk about voting rights. What's next? Tell me about this.
That was inspired by 2 things. One, the crazy people who are running our country right now, and particularly the crazy people who are running the state of Georgia, are taking us back. And I'm going to go so far as to say, as of 2016, we are going back in time. You should be able to see the world rushing by us these days, but we're going in an opposite direction from where we were going prior to 2016. For example, let's talk about, as you said earlier, voting rights is an issue. Roe versus Wade is something that has been in the news a lot, and there's all there. So the powers that be here in Georgia are making it, for those of you who are not in Georgia, are making it harder for people to vote. Our people spent hundreds of thousands of lives, years and years and years, trying to obtain the right to speak for ourselves by voting in this country. And here we are in 2022, 2023, and that's going away.
Yeah.
So that was the first thing. And then another issue here in Atlanta has been the young brothers and sisters who are on the corners, who are on the off ramps selling water pop.
The water boys,
and and the city of Atlanta has decided to make that illegal. I understand why the city has a problem with it. The children are possibly endangering their lives, okay? However, they should be applauded, I think, for their entrepreneurial thinking. They are figuring out a way to make money selling water on the corners. And so it occurred to me that we need to be more concerned about how particularly teenagers who will be able to vote soon. These young people are 13, 14. They're going to be able to vote at 18, assuming we can keep that alive.
Yeah.
How do they see us as adults? What do they think of the way that we are running the world? So the young men that you see in that image are not trying to sell water. They're too young to vote, but they're trying to do their part in the election process by giving away what they would ordinarily be selling. They have water, they have snacks, they have bipartisan snacks. And so they're just trying to do their little bit, but their T-shirts tell you where they are. They're the future voters. And people, the powers that be, who are dependent upon that vote should be paying more attention to those young people.
Absolutely.
So that's what that's about.
Yeah, and now we get into some real issues now when we talk about it, because that right to vote thing it's expressed that they particularly are going to purposefully remove the right for vote for all kinds of reasons. They don't want people to vote on college campuses. They want people to vote in certain areas.
But it's okay to carry a gun on college campus.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You need a gun. You don't need to vote, right? But and all these issues seem to be conflating together. Yeah. In the same way that it's just about this kind of authoritarian rule that people just want the power. They don't necessarily want to do anything with the power.
They don't want the responsibility.
Yeah, they want the responsibility. Yeah. They don't actually want to do anything. They don't want the consequences of it either.
Especially the consequences.
And especially the consequences that come from not taking care of the people that voted for you. And so now, like that, even that is becoming, or I can't say it's becoming, because you can see, especially with the abortion issue that's online, a lot of pushback at the polls for some of the policies that people are trying to like institute. It's like a small group of people wanting to rule a large group of people.
And that's the whole point. It's a very small group of people who, and you kind of feel bad for them, because until 2016, they were sort of closeted because their opinions were not those of the majority. We were rolling along. We had issues that we were still working on, but we were rolling along. And suddenly that man came along and screech, brakes.
Yeah.
And then we've been rolling downhill backwards ever since then. And so, I think that needs to be talked about.
Absolutely.
Because it needs to be said.
Because I think it's a certain amount of progress that we took for granted.
Absolutely.
Like, we definitely assumed everything would continue the way, not even knowing that it could be taken away from us.
But that's the way progress is made.
Yeah.
You build upon what you have, and you do it incrementally. You put a little bit on top, and then you put a little bit more on top, and you just keep going until you get to a place where you can see over the top of the hill. And maybe over the top of the hill, there's an actual solution to your problems. But if we go back to Father Knows Best, we're never going to get there.
Yeah.
But I really feel like the children who survived the pandemic, the children who lost educational impetus doing, the children who will be old enough to vote in next year, I think they're going to have something to say. they're not stupid. They're paying very close attention to what's going on.
Yeah.
Which I don't know you can always say to every adult. Adults oftentimes have too much other stuff to think about to really kind of dive down into why things are happening.
Yeah.
So,
because I think things get personal and particular, like after a while. Like you worry about your particular thing and not so much the national consensus of what's happening, or even the zeitgeist, right, of what's in the air that's happening to people. Like
exactly.
you can't take the banning of books, black books, right, in particular.
I haven't done that yet,
but it's
that's such a scary thing.
It's all happening at the same time. So you have the climate change, you have abortion, you have the books, you have the education, you have the voting rights, all of this stuff. It's very easy to get segmented into your own particular thing and kind of lose the fact that so much of this stuff is happening, like it's creating chaos.
And it's all interconnected. And the most important thing, I don't know if this is on your list, but the smoky, what's it called? The smoke-filled rooms.
Yes.
In that.
Yes.
So this is, all the stuff that's happening. Is it coincidental that it's all happening at the same time?
No, somebody's taking advantage.
Exactly. And somebody planned this. Conspiracy theories are all good, but I didn't grow up. I lived in Denver, Colorado for a long time, and you could see over a period of 30 years that I was there, certain things come into play, and we as citizens that things were happening to sort of didn't find out about it until they had broken ground. And they always say, well, we want community input. No, you don't.
No,
you just want an excuse to say, well, we talked to them. Yeah, but you had already broken ground when you talked to me.
Yeah.
So anyway.
Yeah. Because they already had the plans for it, already made up. Yeah.
20 years, minimum 50 in some instances.
It's crazy. It's crazy. So jump back to your artwork, you got a piece called Leaving Alabama, which is a very strong piece. It's one of those examples of how you populate your pieces with characters, and the characters are all adding something to the story. Nobody's, it's not superfluous. Like nobody's just there, like hanging out. Like every facial expression means something.
Yeah, I don't bother to draw you. You have to work.
You have to work. I like that. You have to work and to get drawn. Even like the license plate. Space. Even the license plate is the Roe v. Wade code on the license plate. Yeah. So all these little different things inside of work. Tell me about this piece and how. Let me know how it's put together. Like how do you even start to think about and adjust the things to get it? Because at a certain point, it was kind of like there was no license plate, but then it's like, no, it needs something. This license plate is an opportunity to talk about certain things. You know what I mean?
I wanted to be sure that there was no question about why we were leaving Alabama. And I don't want to pick on Alabama because it could have just as easily have been Georgia or Texas or wherever.
Yeah.
For those who haven't seen it yet, the as Jamal says, the license plate on the Mustang is the what do they call it? The court number for Roe versus Wade. And so it was, as you say, each character in the piece has a job to do. And I wanted to be, I try to be very clear about what my opinion is. You are welcome to form your own opinion or to express your own opinion, but I want you to know without any question about what I think about it. But in that particular instance, again, I was listening to the radio, and one of the local people said something about the court number, and I thought, well, I don't know what that is. So let's look it up. What's the court number for Roe versus Wade? I'm like, oh, okay. So how can I use this? And I was making a Mustang, so it needed a license plate, and the license plate could have said any number of things.
Yeah.
It also has a very big sign that says Y'all come back now. And then that's scratched out with a red paintbrush. And so it just fit. Some things are just, what's the word, serendipitous. It just happens. And you're like, put that in there. That'll work fine. That'll make it even better. Yeah. It's like putting sequins on something.
I like that. I like that process. And which is, you might say that is a contradiction from how much research and setup you go into it. But the setup and the research and the planning, but the execution allows for you to do like certain stuff. I'm
constantly changing it.
Yeah.
Constantly changing. That the one thing I like about my processes, I actually wrote all the processes, numbered them for another event a couple of weeks ago, and they're like 14 different processes for each piece. Everything from the original idea, the research, the gathering of fabrics, the multiple times you draw it, the way it's finished, the signage, everything. And the thing I like about it most is that it allows me to change it even after it's sewn down. Because you can always pull stitches.
Yeah.
I hate pulling stitches, but I can pull it. And you can change your pattern, you can change your color, you can change where it is. You can decide to put flourishes on it or not. And so it's a lot of fun for me. If you're making artwork that's not fun, you should find something else to do. So it's a lot of fun for me.
Nah, it takes too long to make stuff to not have fun. Yeah.
Exactly. And then after you made it and you don't like it, what are you going to do with it? I mean, my work, at least, is not like a painting that you can just white out and start over again. So,
yeah, you put this thing together. And so we were talking earlier, you said an interesting part about one of the fun parts about what you do is actually getting the fabric. Like how's that process for you? Because I assume that you have and I've said this to another tufter, shout out to Simone. She does tufting paintings. And I would assume that you just have a big room full of fabrics in there, just stuffed on top of each other, like a huge pile. You just dive into it every day.
It's called a stash. There's a word. One of the things that makes me laugh about quilters in particular is their stashes, because they in fact have rooms full of fabric. They have rooms that they have taken apart and put back together again so that it has a place for their fabric. Yeah. I am using what was the living room in my house, the place where my father interrogated my dates when I was dating, and what used to be a sunken dining room in the house as my studio. And I do have one wall that has large plastic bins full of fabric. And then because I'm about to start a new series and because I've been obtaining fabric specifically for that series, I also have several large plastic bags that are full of fabric. Some things you just need. You need, I use sheets for my drawing surface. So you always need those. I get those from the Goodwill. I need a lot of brown because I do Black people. I love prints. I have African fabrics. I have fabrics from various parts of the world. People give me fabric.
I'm sure.
I have artists who used to do fabric who say, I'm switching back to, do you want my fabric? Of course I do. That's a silly question.
Yes, I would.
But lately, I have been spending a lot of time in the Goodwill because if you think about it, a man's shirt, particularly a large man's shirt, is like 1.5 yards of cotton, 100% cotton if you pick out the cotton. And the shirt at the Goodwill costs $6.25. At the fabric store, that same yard of cotton costs $7 to $8. And if you get a tie-dyed piece of fabric, then you're talking about $20, $25 for a yard. So, and then I also think about the fact that when you discard a piece of clothing, if you are smart enough, first of all, to donate it to someone else who needs it, that's a great thing, because then it'll get more use. If you donate it to the Goodwill, then it hopefully gets sold and gets more use. But if it doesn't, then they usually ship it overseas. And if they don't use it, then it lands up in a landfill. So if I pull it out of the Goodwill stash and put it into my stash, because I'm going to cut it up and use little teeny tiny pieces of it and get to use that same shirt 50 times, then I feel like I'm doing my part with regard to climate change and garbage and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
So I do spend quite a bit of time in the Goodwill pulling fabric. The people at the fabric stores know me by name. Here she comes. She's, get her whatever she wants because she's going to spend some money while she's here. But if you can give me any cotton, wool, or silk that you have, I try to stay away from polyesters just because it doesn't. I don't like the fact that we're still making things out of dead dinosaurs that's not going to biodegrade. And but yeah, I'm crazy about fabric. The same way that I used to go into an art supply store and drool over the tubes of paint that I could not afford to buy. I do the same thing in fabric stores now.
Yeah. So when you go in, especially like when you're looking at browns, I imagine there's a brown section and it has all kinds of patterns in it.
You would be surprised. No, that is not
really?
the case.
Really?
No. For every other color, that's true. But for browns, there just isn't. There's brown solids, but brown prints, which I really like to use, always have some other color in them, even if it's just black or white. Yeah. And so sometimes it works, but sometimes it doesn't. So I really have to hunt. I found a man's shirt recently that was a lovely color brown that I had not been able. But when you're thinking about skin tones, it's hard to find brown.
Wow.
So if you, for your audience, if you have brown cotton, bring it to Black Art in America and I'll pick it up here.
Send it to Dawn, so she can keep making these pieces that she got going on. One piece that had a lot of browns, but a very effective composition, the Trump era Incarcerated, which I really love the setup for this piece. Tell us about how you kind of envision it.
This is the one with the guy in the bars and his family. Again, it was an idea that came to me because of something that I heard, and I'm trying to remember something I heard just the other day, but it talked about the numbers of black and brown people, men and women, who are in jail for things that were illegal when they went to jail 20 years ago, but are not illegal anymore. Yeah. And then I was thinking about the children whose parent is incarcerated and how that child is the many ways that men in particular are extracted from the population and what that does to us as a people. We have so many young men who are growing up without a man in their households, trying to learn to be men. And of course, again, Dr. Francis Cress Welsing has a lot of theory about how the lack of men in our civilization has affected us, and why Black men and brown men in particular are being extracted from the population, and how that has affected who we are today. And so what I wanted to say in that piece is that it's not just the man that's incarcerated, the whole family is behind bars.
Yeah.
And so I think it worked out really well in that piece.
Oh, no, it's a powerful composition.
Yeah,
Again,
thanks.
and what I really like and appreciate is sometimes work can be abstract. Like here, Black Art America, they got an abstract show that's up right now. And you look at it, you can get all kinds of inferences from it. But you have a very particular view of what you're trying to communicate, a very particular point. How much is your work based on, I have to communicate this thing?
All of it. All of it. I keep trying to find, in fact, when I finished the Tip of the Iceberg series, I said, okay, I'm going to sit myself down and I'm not going to pick up a pencil until I find something happy to say. I had you may be familiar with my Sins of the Father series. It's all about racial atrocities in the country against Black people, all right? I had that show up years and years ago, and a man walked up to me, he said, your work is lovely. It's really powerful, but it's really sad. He said it was depressing. He said, don't you ever have anything happy to say? And that started me. If you go on the website, you'll see a category of pieces that talk about. So I did a series of cute little kids in response to him.
Right.
That says, it's about all the things that kids do. And it was like 20 pieces in a series. And I sort of got out of my system. But now people say, well, you live in a very dark place. And I'm like, it's not dark to me. It's educational to me, because I'm educating myself and hopefully educating someone else. So it bubbles out of me. I haven't been able to think, well, that's not quite true. I was going to say I haven't been able to think of anything happy to say, but I did think of something the other day. But it's necessary, in my opinion, for me at least, to express. I don't think they're just my opinions. I think that there are a lot of people who feel the way I do, and it's necessary for me as me, to get it out of me. I need to learn more. I need to do more. I need to say more. And until I do that, until I express whatever it is, it sort of bottles up in me. So my artwork is me sort of spewing my opinion about whatever the subject is. Because if I honestly feel like I will go, can't say that, I will go absolutely crazy if I don't do this. So it very much is a purging. It very much is a need for me to. I think serious artists feel that way. There's something inside you that when you would like to sit down and watch television, it's like, no.
Right.
Get up.
Yeah.
Go here. I got this great idea. Let's go do this.
Yeah.
It's like, a little kid that would rather be outside than inside.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. Because it's not so much that you just want to do it, like you have to do it.
Oh, absolutely.
Like,
I would be a crazy person if I didn't have art.
I like that.
This is the thing I'm good at. I was lucky enough to learn the thing that I'm good at like the age of 16. And I've done many things, had a straight job, I have husband, I have kids. And so I've had to do all of that. But the thing that has kept my feet on the ground is my artwork.
I love that. Yeah.
Got to do it.
Yeah. It's part of self-regulating. Like
Exactly.
you can't like let this
It's like
stuff
a
off. Like you
little
have to have an
valve
outlet.
that
Yeah.
needs to be twisted every now
Yes,
and
you
then
have to have
blow
an
off
outlet
some
for
steam.
it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And like you said, it's not like we're not feeling these things, right?
Exactly.
It's like you're taking it in, and as we start to process all the stuff that's happening.
One of the reasons I feel like we have children who are going into their school with guns is that they don't have an outlet for their feelings. You can't always talk about, but you can always draw something on a piece of paper.
Yes.
And you can show it or not show it. But do something with it, drive a nail into a piece of wood, break your crayons, do something that makes you feel better, that doesn't harm and in fact educates other people. So that's where I am.
No, I love that. And then even in the process, you may not even know how you feel because you haven't
I'm still
thought
working
about it
it
yet.
out.
Yeah, you have thought
That's
about
true.
it. Like, how do I visually represent what I'm feeling? You have to organize your feelings and be able to.
Yeah, I'm
to
having
have
that
it.
problem right now, as a matter of fact.
You are?
Yeah.
Like for the new stuff?
Yeah, because it started out like as one thing, and then I started reading and listening, and so now it's kind of turned into another thing. My thinking about it has changed, but I have already drawn and blown up. And so I'm like halfway through the process. So I can't sort of just go back. It's like I'm not the kind of person that can put a book down
Right.
until I finish it,
Right.
regardless of how bad the book is.
I gotta know.
I need to know how it ends, right?
Yeah.
But so now I'm trying to figure a way to sort of meld the two thoughts, and it's giving me a little bit of problem.
I'm sure.
I'm gonna work it out.
Of course you're gonna work it out. Yeah, and this is the new stuff that you're working on. So the new stuff, you give us an idea of what it is you're tackling. Just a little taste of it.
It's called Fear, and it is not all, but several of the sort of iconic photos that we've grown up with that show Black people being abused in one way or another, whether it's actually being lynched or if it's advertising, or if I collect iron banks, and so you get a lot of images of what other people think of us. So I'm taking photographs that we are familiar with and flipping the races in them. And what I hope to do is to generate some empathy. I feel like sympathy is something that you forget about as soon as you turn the page or walk away or can't hear that song anymore. But empathy is something that sticks with you. So I'm trying to create some empathy with regard to our struggle to be human in this country, to be considered human, because we always were humans, but we were not thought of as humans. So take any photo that from the 60s or earlier, and so I'm developing this entire storyline about, if the people in Africa were interested in, or not interested, if we were traveling on water, discovering new places, or I should say when we were, conquering, who would we have conquered? And how would history have been changed if the lion were telling the story versus the hunter telling the story? And so the problem that I'm having is that, as I said, I started out with one idea, and then I started reading. I read the 1619 Project, and it informed the idea that I had originally. But then I read the ISIS papers. I'm in the process of reading them, and that has kind of changed what I know.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm kind of up and down with it right now. But stay tuned.
Yes, definitely stay tuned to that.
The end of the year, I should have it worked out one way or the other.
Yes, I love that. I love that as an idea, even as like a cross current for things that are happening, because 1619 is about what happened, period, history. Like the story, like you said, from the hunter's point of view. But the ISIS paper is making you consider there's a different lens in which we should be looking at these things.
Exactly.
And so, yes, that creates like a dichotomy.
Yeah.
I'm interested.
Okay. So can't wait till it be done.
I love that, Joe. I love that. And all artists should do that. All artists should be researching not just counterpoints, but the different lens. Like, what is the next thing that you're bringing to the conversation, so that you don't have to just simply, spit the narrative of the 1619 project. Like, if there's another interpretation that should have been had. If there's people whose story is not being told, why not tell their story? Like, they deserve to tell their story just as much as anybody else.
Is it fantasy or is it ugly truth? Is it the past or is it a future? So I don't know yet. I'll let you know when I figure it out.
Oh, Dawn talking that good talk today. That's what I'm talking. That's what I'm talking about. That's that good stuff, yo. I love it, Joe. I love it. And as we end, I just want to mention a little bit about like in a lot of your pieces. I understand like when they talk about the depression part, but I think is not depressing. It's unnerving for us to be confronted with some of these realities. I was reading a book the other day, and the thing that struck me about the book as they were describing slavery and its existence is how much of the threat of slavery was what controlled people's actions. And because those threats are either unspoken, unrealized, unvisualized, or unaccounted for, people don't truly understand the slave experience. And so when you live somewhere where they might have sold your mother and your father away from you, you might have just seen somebody be have their genitals cut off and stuffed in their mouth, burned alive. You may have just been starving in a field working for 16 hours a day for the last 8 years of your life. Like, all of these things are happening that we know, but we don't account for how much pressure that puts onto a person. Like how truly pushed to the limits the human existence was based on the things. Like, women were routinely raped by either other slaves or either the overseer, or either the master. Bodies were just bodies. Human beings were chattel. Like, we don't understand that part of it enough to really have a conversation about.
And not only that, how that not only affected the people that it was happening to, but those people had children and grandchildren and nieces and nephews and great-great-grands. So, 200 years later, we're still here having psychological issues based on something that happened to our ancestors 200 years ago, keeping in mind that things change, they morph, they become less obvious. And so there's all kinds of subtle rapes and castrations that we're experiencing now that some of us don't know enough about ourselves, our history, to realize that we're still being raped and castrated.
Yes. We've accepted it as life.
Exactly.
And which is a terrible place for us to be.
That's a terrible place to stop.
But that's exactly why we got people like you speaking that truth to people. And so if you are confronted by it, and if it does make you depressed, you should be depressed.
That's true.
Because it is depressing. This is not like this is not here to placate you or make you feel better. It's not a balm for your soul.
Yeah,
like
if you want happiness, you should not come to my shows. If you want sweetness and light, you should probably go see somebody else.
But it's the truth. If you want the truth and a genuine conversation, that's what we got from Dawn Williams Boyd. Thank you for coming on the show today.
I tell pleasure.
You,
Thanks.
Wonderful artist. You got to check her out. Where can they find your work?
You can find my work at my website, which is dawnwilliamsboyd.com. You can check out Fort Gansevoort Again, FORTGANSEVOORT.com.
Absolutely. And we got to bring you back to talk about the African Americans for the arts one day, like really get into that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that's a whole nother conversation.
Yeah, good conversation to be had. We're going to bring Dawn back for sure. Thank you for coming on the podcast today.
My pleasure. Thank you, Jamal, for having me.